I had the great pleasure and honor, frankly, of representing a fellow by the name of Andrew Whitehead. Some of you may know him. He is a retired U.S. Navy sailor who, after losing friends in the Pentagon in 9/11, started a website called Anti-Care. And he started this basically because, as he put it, he was offended at seeing the people from CARE put up in the media and being represented to the public as simply civil rights, concerned American-type civil rights citizens. When he was reading information put out by, among others, Steve Emerson and Daniel Pipes and a whole host of other folks, suggesting that the truth was something very different. Now, the information for my talk today primarily comes from two lawsuits. One, my suit, CARE versus Whitehead, and the other, the suit that EJ mentioned, the criminal prosecution, U.S. versus Holy Land Foundation. A little bit of background about Andrew's case. The nexus of the lawsuit, the motive allegedly for the lawsuit, were statements that Andrew had posted, charging that CARE was and is a terrorist-supporting front organization that is partially funded by terrorists, that seeks to overthrow constitutional government in the United States in favor of an Islamic theocracy. Andrew further stated that CARE had direct ties to Hamas and received, quote, direct funding from Islamic terrorists supporting countries. Now, he had had this website up for, frankly, a very short period of time, and he didn't get a lot of traffic. And if any of you have ever had reason to go to his website, you will see it is not the most, shall we say, visually sophisticated website you're ever going to find. Andrew did this basically himself. It was a billboard for him, so to speak. And again, he wasn't terribly well known, certainly not as well known as Mr. Emerson or Mr. Pipes or anybody else. But CARE picked him out for special treatment. In January of 2004, CARE sent a letter to Mr. Whitehead, a cease and desist letter, threatening him with personal ruin unless he immediately turned off his website. They were going to take his house, you see. I should point out that CARE sent a similar letter to a Cornell student newspaper writer shortly after they went after Andrew. And basically what it says, the letter in summary, is take down your website or else. And by the way, if you tell anybody that we're threatening you, we're going to sue you. So Andrew, to his everlasting credit, says, screw you guys, takes the letter and posts it on the internet for everybody to see, which is how we found him. Sure enough, though, in April of 2004, CARE files a complaint complaining that the statements that I had just mentioned were in fact false and defamatory. Now, with respect to the Saudi connection, at approximately this period of time, the Saudis have been very active in London bringing defamation lawsuits as a way of shutting up critics, and they had been very successful at it. And we know from documents in my case and other documents that the CARE leadership cadres very often trot off to the Gulf and to Saudi for visits. We're going to talk about some of that in just a second. And I don't have a document that I can hand to you and show you and prove this, but my supposition is that certainly the litigation jihad was discussed at that time, and CARE saw Mr. Whitehead as low-hanging fruit. He was poor, he was powerless, and presumably easily cowed. One of the things we know about CARE, and we know this from wiretap transcripts that were introduced into evidence in the Holy Land Foundation case, is that one of the purposes for forming CARE, according to Omar Ahmad, the CARE CEO for many years, and really, as far as I can tell, the intellectual driving force behind the organization, was to have CARE serve as a conduit for lawsuits right from the get-go. And they have been a litigation machine up until relatively recently. And as I said, they picked out Mr. Whitehead. They did not go after Mr. Pipes, Dr. Pipes. They did not go after Mr. Emerson. They went after Mr. Whitehead. again, because they believe he was poor, powerless, and easily cowed. But there was one thing they didn't count on, and that was Greenberg Traurig. By our lights, this was something that any good American would do. This was a free speech issue in its purest form. And we did it pro bono, not a penny. And I'm going to ask you to compare, thank you. Thank my partners. And I want to make a comparison, though, to illustrate, I hope, really, and try and drive home how significant this was. If you look up on the screen, I'm going to ask you to compare and contrast. Now, this is according to the Washington Times, and I just saw this, and I've incorporated it into this presentation. You may have heard about Gitmo, Guantanamo Bay, right? Okay. You may not know, or maybe you do, is that there's been a lot of litigation. It's gone up to the Supreme Court and so forth. And there have been a lot of very prominent law firms representing the inmates at Gitmo, allegedly pro bono. Allegedly. As it turns out, a Kuwait-based foundation called the International Council Bureau, which is funded in part by the Kuwaiti government, paid over $4 million to U.S. law and PR firms to work for the Gitmo detainees pro bono. At least $4 million. And who are the firms who are involved? Well, I don't know how many lawyers are in the room, but you may recognize some of these names. Sherman and Sterling, more than $1 million. When the managing partner of Sherman and Sterling was asked, wait a minute, weren't you doing this pro bono? He says, well, of course it's pro bono. We should get paid more than we did. Arnold and Porter, Pillsbury, Winthrop, Shaw Pittman, LLP, and an outfit called Levick Strategic Communications. Levick represented Dubai. Remember Dubai ports? Mm-hmm. And according to the article, Levick, quote, reported contacts with the ACLU for possible collaboration on the Orange Ribbon movement to shut down Gitmo. So we didn't get $4 million from anybody. Okay, lawsuit's filed. And what do? Well, we go after them, hammer and tong. We filed hundreds of interrogatories, requests for documents, and requests for admission. Wanted to see basically every document they had, every trip they'd ever taken. We wanted to crawl around inside of their underwear drawer and really find what was there. Now, I understand that's really just a disgusting visual. I apologize. But that's what we were doing. After we filed our initial discovery package, CARE filed an amended motion for judgment. In Virginia, that's what we call a complaint. It dropped the allegations that Mr. Whitehead's statements with respect to CARE's ties to Hamas, Islamists overseas, and foreign financing were false and defamatory. Okay, so all of a sudden the allegedly false statements, may not have been quite so false, at least some of them. We got some discovery answers, which were very fascinating, as we'll see in a minute, and a motion for a protective order. Protective order basically saying they can't get as much as they asked for. At the end of the day, as we see up there, the false and defamatory statements that CARE was litigating about were the following. One, CARE is a terrorist-supporting front organization, and two, CARE seeks to overthrow constitutional government in the United States. Well, I saw that and said, thank you very much, because front organization to me is a very broad term. Now give me all my stuff. So we just continued to fight. We filed a motion to compel. It is, I can tell you with no hesitation, one of the great filings in any court in the history of the United States or the common law system. And we asked the court to order CARE to give up their information. Shortly before the hearing on this motion, CARE settled the case. And the complaint was dismissed with prejudice. There was no apology by Mr. Whitehead. There was no retraction. And the false and defamatory statements that CARE sued, the statements that CARE alleged, entitled them to ruin Mr. Whitehead. They asked for $1.35 million in damages because of the things Mr. Whitehead said. All of those statements, in their original form, are still today posted at Anti-CARE.